Judge Jacqueline Miles had spent over 3 decades inside courtrooms, fighting for truth, fairness, and the rule of law. She believed the badge meant service, the system meant safety. But tonight, on a quiet street in San Mateo, California, all of that collapsed in the glow of red and blue lights flashing in her rearview mirror. She wasn't speeding. Her registration was valid. Her Tesla rolled steady beneath the oak trees. But to the officer behind her, none of that mattered. He didn't see a federal judge. He saw a black woman in a nice car, and that was enough. Within minutes, she'd be forced from her vehicle, placed in handcuffs, and humiliated, without a single law broken. Now let us ask you this. Where are you watching from? Have you or someone you know ever experienced something like this? Drop a comment below. Your voice might help someone else find theirs. San Mateo was the kind of place where porch lights came on at the same time every night, where kids left bikes on lawns and neighbors waved without thinking. Judge Miles had lived on Willow Bend Drive for 17 years. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. Oak trees lined the sidewalks. The smell of jasmine floated in the dusk. And on most nights, her Tesla Model S eased down that road like clockwork, jazz humming, windows cracked just enough to feel the California air. Jacqueline wasn't just respected, she was known. Not for her title, but for her calm, the way she listened, the way she ruled. Even though she ruled against called her fair, widowed, no kids, a federal judge who still watered her own plants. She had just left the courthouse after a 10-hour docket, looking forward to nothing more than a cup of chamomile tea and Miles Davis on vinyl. At first, it was faint, a flicker, a hum. Then the sirens grew louder, chasing her heartbeat. Red and blue burst in her rear-view mirror, too close, too fast. She wasn't speeding, not even close. The car was registered. The plates were clean. Her record was spotless. Jacqueline eased the car to the curb beneath the shade of a towering tree exactly 3 blocks from her home. She lowered the volume, took a breath, rolled down the window. Both hands went up to the steering wheel in plain view, fingers steady. It was instinct, a routine, a muscle memory trained from decades of watching the news, from years of being black in America. The officer's steps were loud, heavy, purposeful. A flashlight beamed into her eyes before a single word was spoken. "License and registration," the voice barked. Sharp, commanding, impersonal. Jacqueline didn't flinch. "Of course, officer. May I ask the reason for the stop?" No response. Just a second, harsher demand. "I said license and registration." She reached slowly, narrating every move. "I'm opening the glove box now. My documents are inside." She handed him not just her license, but her federal judiciary ID. The beam of light barely dipped. He didn't look at it, didn't even blink. He stared at her like the badge in her hand was a lie, like her presence on this street, her street, was a threat. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. Jacqueline blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Now." His hand hovered near his holster. The neighborhood around her, the peace, the chaminade, the memory of Miles Davis, all of it evaporated. Something darker took its place. The air changed, the silence grew dangerous. And she knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a moment, and she wasn't in control anymore. She stepped out slowly, not because she was guilty, but because she knew how fast things could turn. She knew what sudden movements could be misread as. In her heels and tailored navy suit, Judge Jacqueline Miles looked more like someone stepping onto a courtroom floor than onto asphalt. But to Officer Kyle Whitman, she was just another body to control. "Face the car," he ordered. She turned, calm, compliant, but inside her chest tightened. She'd handled death threats from angry defendants. She'd been called names in the press, but nothing compared to the icy fear running down her spine now. She heard his footsteps behind her, fast, intentional. A click, his radio, probably. "We've got a possible match on a stolen black Tesla," he said, too loud, like he wanted the neighbors to hear. Jacqueline turned her head slightly, enough to speak but not provoke. "That can't be right. This car is registered to me. Plates are clean. I live right there. Willow Bend Drive, number 819. Whitman didn't respond. Instead, he leaned into the open window of her Tesla and started rummaging through the passenger side. No consent, no warrant, no questions. Another car rolled up. Backup. Out stepped Officer Daniel Brooks, early 30s, clean cuts, hesitant in his stride. He looked from Whitman to Jacqueline, to the ID still clutched in Whitman's hand. "She said she's a federal judge," he said carefully. Whitman scoffed. "And I'm the Pope." Jacqueline looked directly at Brooks. "You can verify my identity. It's all there. Run the plates. It'll take 2 minutes." But Whitman wasn't listening. He was too deep in performance mode now. "Open the trunk," he barked at Brooks. The younger officer hesitated. She didn't consent to a search." Whitman snapped, "Probable cause. We've got a suspicious vehicle matching a stolen report. That's all I need." Brooks froze, then reluctantly he approached the back of the car. Jacqueline watched him, his fingers shaky on the trunk latch. She wanted to scream, wanted to demand a lawyer, her rights, her dignity. But all she could do was breathe. The trunk opened with a metallic sigh. Inside, emergency kit, a folded umbrella, a gym bag, the usual. Then Whitman leaned in, pulled something out from behind the gym bag, a black duffel, bulky, unzipped halfway. "What's this?" he asked. Jacqueline's brows furrowed. "That's not mine." Whitman opened it fully. Cash, bundled, tight, rubber banded in stacks, and a handful of clear plastic bags. White powder visible even under the dim streetlights. Jacqueline went cold. "No," she said quietly. "No, that wasn't there. That's not mine." Whitman gave a slow, theatrical nod. "Uh-huh, sure, never is." Brooks looked stunned. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He stared at the duffel bag like it was radioactive. Whitman lifted his radio again. "Requesting additional units. Possible narcotics discovery. Suspect detained." Jacqueline could barely hear it. Her ears were ringing. She stared at the bell, tried to remember if she'd left her car alone at any point. Had anyone followed her? Was this really happening? Across the street, a curtain moved. A porch light flicked on, then another. Neighbors were starting to notice. It was just beginning. The bag sat on the trunk like a loaded accusation. Officer Brooks held it with both hands, unsure whether to place it down or throw it as far from him as possible. The stacks of cash were still visible, the plastic bags tucked between them like landmines waiting to go off. Jacqueline didn't move. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice measured but thick with disbelief. "I'm telling you, that was not in my trunk." Brooks looked from the duffel to her face, then to Whitman, then back again. Something wasn't sitting right with him. You could see it in his jaw, tight, in his breath, short. "She said she's a judge," he repeated, softer now, like he needed to say it again just to make it real. Whitman ignored him. "Plenty of judges get dirty," he muttered. "Power doesn't mean innocent." He pulled the ID card from his pocket, finally glancing at it. He frowned. Then he smirked. "Federal court," he said. "Impressive title. Too bad it won't matter." Jacqueline narrowed her eyes. "It will, especially when Internal Affairs sees how you ignored a federal ID and failed to verify a single piece of information." Her voice wasn't angry, it was surgical, calm. The voice of someone who'd buried people in cross-examination and dissected lies for a living. Whitman didn't like that. "You match the description," he shot back. "What description?" she asked. He didn't answer. Across the street, another porch light flicked on, then another. 1B1, front doors opened. Neighbors in slippers and robes stood silently on their steps, watching, phones in hand, recording. A woman called out, sharp, familiar. "Jacqueline, everything okay?" It was Loretta Jenkins, 72, widow, lived across the street since the 80s. Her voice had settled more disputes in this neighborhood than the HOA and local police combined. Whitman turned toward her. "Ma'am, please stay back. Police matter." "This is a neighborhood matter," Loretta snapped, "and I've known that woman longer than you've been shaving." "What's going on?" Jacqueline turned her head, just enough to speak over her shoulder. "They say my car's stolen, found a bag of drugs in the trunk I've never seen before." There was a pause. Then Loretta said, loud and clear, That's bull. Brooks flinched. More neighbors stepped forward, phones angled, eyes squinting through the dark. Whitman's posture shifted. His confidence faltered, just slightly. "Back up," he barked. "Everyone back up. This is a controlled scene." But no one moved. Someone began live streaming. "We're live on Facebook, Maplewood and Willow Bend. Judge Miles just got pulled out of her car. No reason. Now they found drugs." Whitman's jaw tightened. "Turn those off." "Nope," came the reply. Another neighbor, a young father named Derek, stepped forward, holding his phone like a badge. "Just letting y'all know, this is being uploaded as we speak, so you might want to think twice before planting anything else." Whitman turned red. Jacqueline finally stepped fully upright, no longer leaning against her car. Her voice rang out low and strong. "He didn't check my plates, didn't run my ID, didn't ask a single question. Just pulled me out of my own vehicle and found something I've never seen before." The air grew thick, tense, as if the street itself was holding its breath. Brooks shifted his feet. "Maybe we should run her information, just to be sure." Whitman barked, "I said we have probable cause." "But you didn't check anything," Jacqueline said. "And now there's a crowd, now there are cameras. Now it's not just your word against mine." She stepped forward, slowly, graceful, not threatening. "Let me be clear. You didn't just pull over a woman, you pulled over a federal judge, in front of her neighbors, in a car registered to her. And now the world is watching." Her words echoed down the block. No one interrupted. Even Whitman didn't speak. Because in that moment, there was nothing to say. Only silence, the kind that feels like judgment before the verdict. In the neighborhood, those porches and cell phones and tired eyes and slippers, they weren't just witnesses anymore. They were the jury, and Whitman had just stepped into the wrong courtroom. For a few seconds, no one moved. Officer Brooks was still holding the black duffel, like it might detonate if he blinked too hard. Whitman's fingers twitched near his belt, and Jacqueline, though calm on the surface, felt the heat of humiliation rise through her bones. "This is my home," she said quietly, to no one in particular. "That's my car. I've driven it every day for 4 years, and I have never seen that bag in my life." Whitman let out a dry laugh. "Sure, always the same story. It's not mine. Funny how it's never theirs." A few people in the growing crowd murmured, clearly uncomfortable with the scene. Loretta crossed her arms on her porch, not backing down. "Funny how it's always their car until it's a black woman driving it," she muttered, loud enough for the officers to hear. Brooks finally set the bag down on the trunk, carefully, like it was soaked in gasoline. He looked at Jacqueline again, this time with a flicker of something more than doubt, regret. "You really didn't know it was there?" he asked, voice low. Jacqueline didn't blink. "No, I'm telling you, I locked my trunk this morning. I went from the courthouse to here, one stop at a gas station, and I didn't leave the car." He nodded slowly, then looked at Whitman. "Maybe we should get this logged and secured. I mean, we have enough," Whitman snapped. "Possession is 9/10 of the law." "No, it's not," Jacqueline said firmly. "Not when it's planted." Whitman turned to her, lips curling. "You accusing me of something, Your Honor?" Jacqueline didn't flinch. "No, I'm stating facts. And the facts are, you never verified my ID, you never ran my plates, you ignored my credentials, and now you're standing over a bag full of felonies that didn't exist 5 minutes ago." She pointed at the ID, still half crumpled in Whitman's hand. "If you had taken 5 seconds to call dispatch, we wouldn't be here, but you didn't. You assumed, based on race, gender, car, pick one." The street was so quiet you could hear someone's AC unit kicking in 3 houses down. Then a small voice broke through. It was Derek, still live streaming. "Just for the record, officer, what was the stolen car report about? Can we hear the description?" Whitman hesitated. It matched the vehicle. Black Tesla. No plate info given. "So you pulled over a black woman in a black car because maybe she matched a vague description?" Derek asked. Whitman didn't answer. Jacqueline stepped forward. "You didn't have a license plate number. You had a black Tesla. That's like saying a silver Honda Civic and stopping every Asian driver." The neighbors murmured again, more clearly on her side now. Brooks stepped away from the trunk, moving toward the patrol vehicle. "I'm gonna run the plates just to—" "No," Wishtman barked. "I told you. You didn't tell me anything that makes legal sense," Brooks said, finally with some spine. "We need to do this right." He got into the cruiser, shut the door behind him, and radioed dispatch. His voice was muffled, but Jacqueline could still hear the numbers. "California plate 6XGZ142. Everyone waited. The crowd held its breath. Jacqueline stood completely still, arms at her side, chest rising and falling, slowly. Then the response came. "Dispatch to Unit 12, vehicle registered to Jacqueline Miles. No active warrants, no stolen reports. Valid registration. Residential address, 899 Willow Bend Drive." Jacqueline let the breath go. So did Loretta, so did Derek, so did half the street. Whitman didn't move. He was staring at the bag now, like it had turned on him, like it might speak and betray him. Jacqueline turned to him slowly. "Now what?" He didn't answer. Brooks stepped out of the cruiser and returned to the trunk. "We should wait for Captain Walters. He'll want to see this himself." "Oh, he'll see it," Loretta added. "So will half the damn state when this video hits the news." Jacqueline looked at the phone still recording her, still streaming. She wasn't embarrassed. Not anymore. She was angry. "I've ruled over civil rights cases, narcotics trafficking, RICO charges, federal misconduct hearings. I've read hundreds of reports just like this, black citizens stopped without cause, but I never thought I'd become one." Whitman finally spoke. "You think your job makes you untouchable?" "No," she said. "I think my record proves I follow the law. And tonight you didn't." A new sound joined the night. An engine, a larger, heavier vehicle turning onto the street, slow, deliberate, authoritative. A black SUV with government plates and low-profile emergency lights. Captain Gregory Walters had arrived. The vehicle rolled to a stop behind the patrol cars. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in uniform stepped out. Gray-haired, polished boots, the weight of decades in every movement. His eyes scanned the scene instantly. The bag on the trunk, the cameras, the crowd, the officers. Then he spotted her. "Judge Miles?" he asked, brow furrowed. She nodded once. "Captain?" He looked at Whitman. "What the hell is going on here?" And just like that, everything shifted again. Captain Gregory Walters was not a man easily rattled, but as he stepped onto Willow Bend Drive and saw a federal judge standing beside her Tesla with a duffel bag full of drugs on the trunk and half the block holding up their phones, his jaw tightened in a way that said, "This just became a nightmare." "Judge Miles," he repeated, slower now. "Please tell me what's going on." Jacqueline didn't waste a breath. "I was pulled over 3 blocks from my home. No cause, no plate check. I presented my ID. It was ignored. Then a search without consent. And suddenly this bag appeared in my trunk." Walters turned to Whitman. "Is this true?" Whitman shrugged, arms tense. "Vehicle matched a vague stolen car report. Suspicious behavior. We found narcotics and cash in the trunk." "Did you confirm the vehicle registration?" Whitman didn't answer. Brooks, standing a few feet away, cleared his throat. "I ran the plates. The car's hers. Registered. No alerts. She also handed over her federal ID the moment we stopped her." Walter's eyes narrowed. "And you didn't check it until after you pulled her out of the car?" Whitman stayed silent. Loretta's voice sliced through the air like a gavel. "Not only that, Captain," she said from her porch, "but your officer didn't like what he saw, so he made up what he wanted to see." Walters turned toward the crowd for the first time. It was larger now. Nearly 24 neighbors stood outside in pajamas, hoodies, house slippers. Some held coffee. Most held phones. A woman in her 20s spoke next. "We saw her get out calmly, hands visible. She asked questions. He gave orders. Didn't even look at her ID, just escalated." Walters took it all in. Then he stepped toward the duffel bag, glanced inside, and closed it with a sigh. "Bodycam's on?" he asked. Brooks nodded. "Mine is. So is his. Then we'll let the footage speak." But the crowd wasn't done. Derek stepped forward again, phone still streaming. "Sir, with all due respect, this goes beyond footage. If we weren't here filming, She might have been in the back of that cruiser already. Jacqueline added, and if I hadn't been a judge, no one would be questioning it now. Walters looked from her to Whitman again. Officer, stand down. Step away from the scene, now. Whitman's face reddened. Captain, with all due, I said step back. Whitman hesitated. For the first time tonight, he looked unsure. He looked small. He backed up slowly, crossing his arms and grinding his teeth in silence. Walters turned back to Brooks. Secure the bag, we'll log it. IA will want it untouched. Then to Jacqueline, he softened. I'm sorry, you shouldn't have gone through this. She didn't nod, didn't forgive, just said, I want transparency. Tonight, not next week, not in a memo. A ripple of quiet agreement passed through the crowd. Loretta raised her voice again. No more closed-door apologies. We want meetings, civilian review boards, access to complaints and body cams. We want change, not PR. Walters looked tired now, but not dismissive. You'll have it, he said. Jacqueline stepped forward. And Officer Whitman? Walters nodded grimly. Suspended pending investigation. Effective now. Gasps, some clapped, some just whispered. Whitman said nothing. Brooks looked down, then back at Jacqueline. I should have stopped it earlier, he said, but I won't stay quiet now. Jacqueline held his gaze. Then don't. Speak the truth. And just like that, the scene transformed. This wasn't about one officer anymore. It wasn't even about one stop. It was about something larger, something rising from porches and sidewalks and live streams. A collective refusal to let silence win. That night, the neighborhood didn't just watch. It stood. And because of that, justice had a fighting chance. Captain Walters stood at the center of the street, arms crossed, eyes locked on the bag, then on Jacqueline. His training told him to maintain neutrality. His gut, however, was already screaming. He turned to Brooks. I want both body cams. Now. Brooks nodded and moved quickly toward the cruiser. Walters followed, pulling out a secure tablet from the command case in his ear. Within seconds, both officers' feeds were uploading, timestamps syncing. The crowd waited, hushed. Even Whitman, now standing awkwardly behind a patrol beam, glanced toward the screen as if praying for some missing justification. Walters pressed play. The footage began from Brooks' camera. The initial stop, Jacqueline's calm voice, her slow movements, the presentation of her ID. The crowd leaned in as her words played back clearly. May I ask the reason for this stop? Here is my license and federal ID. And then, silence. No verification, no response. Just Whitman stepping forward and demanding she exit the vehicle. Pause it, Walters said. He turned to Whitman. You claim she was evasive, uncooperative. Whitman said nothing. Run it forward, Walters told Brooks. The screen showed Brooks opening the trunk. It was clear. Emergency kit, umbrella, gym bag, no black duffel. Walters narrowed his eyes. Freeze frame, zoom. Still no bag. Play 10 seconds later. The camera cut briefly, just a few seconds, but when it resumed, the bag was there. Sitting in the trunk, a quiet gasp rippled through the neighbors. Jacqueline didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Walters let out a long, low breath. That's all I need. He turned to Whitman. You said the bag was in plain sight. The video says otherwise. You said you had probable cause. But you never ran her ID, never confirmed the report, never even waited for dispatch. Whitman clenched his jaw. We had a match. No, you had a profile, and you made a decision before asking a single question. He extended his hand. Badge, gun, now. Whitman blinked. You're serious? Walters didn't answer. He didn't have to. Slowly, Whitman removed his sidearm and badge. His hands shook slightly as he placed them in the evidence box. Walters turned back to the crowd. Officer Kyle Whitman is suspended effective immediately. Internal Affairs will be on site within the hour. This investigation is now open and active. Some clapped, others stayed silent, but the energy had shifted. Jacqueline stepped forward, but not toward Whitman, toward the neighbors. I want to thank you, she said, voice steady, not because you filmed, but because you didn't look away. You showed up, and that might have saved my life. Derek lowered his phone. You shouldn't have needed saving. You're a judge. She smiled bitterly. And what if I wasn't? What if I were just a woman? Just a neighbor? Silence again. Walters spoke, softer now. We're going to review this department, top to bottom. In this community, you'll be part of that process. Loretta folded her arms. We better be. Then from the far end of the crowd, someone asked, what happens to the bag? Walters looked at the sealed duffel, now secured in an evidence container. We'll test it, fingerprints, timeline, everything. And if that bag didn't come from her, we'll find out who it did come from. Jacqueline stared at it one last time, not in fear, in clarity. They tried to define me with that bag, she said, but I've spent 35 years defining what justice really means. Tonight, I got a reminder that justice doesn't start in a courtroom. She turned toward the houses. It starts here, with all of you. And just like that, the story stopped being about a traffic stop. It became something bigger. Even as Captain Walters tried to bring order back to Willow Bend Drive, the ripple effect had already begun. The live streams were still rolling. Derek's phone alone had over 9,000 viewers. Comments streamed in faster than he could read them. This is wild. She's a judge? Name that cop. Fire him. Tag CNN now. Across the street, a local reporter from Channel 6 pulled up in an unmarked SUV. She had been tipped off the moment the live stream went viral. She stepped out with a camera crew and a mic, her face lit more by the LED from a neighbor's phone than her own equipment. Excuse me, she said to Jacqueline cautiously. Would you be willing to speak on record? Jacqueline stood tall, arms by her side, still processing what she had just lived through. She looked around. Whitman was now seated in the back of another patrol unit, silent, disarmed, dismissed. Brooks stood to the side, his shoulders finally uncoiled. Walters was finishing a radio call, asking for IA to arrive. Immediately, no delay, no excuses. The crowd had only grown. Cars slowed to look. Neighbors who had missed the beginning came out with questions. Kids peeked out windows. Dogs barked. But above all, phones remained high. Jacqueline faced the reporter. I don't want this moment to be about revenge, she said, her voice strong despite the strain. I want it to be about reckoning. The reporter lifted her mic. Can you tell us what happened? Jacqueline nodded once. I was driving home. I hadn't broken any laws. I had my ID, my plates were clean. But that didn't matter, because when Officer Whitman looked into my car, he didn't see a federal judge. He saw a target. Gasps rippled from the neighbors. Someone whispered, she said it. Jacqueline went on. I cooperated. I did everything right. But when someone sees you as guilty before they even ask your name, no amount of calm will protect you. The reporter blinked, then asked, what do you want people to take away from tonight? Jacqueline didn't hesitate. That it's not just about me. If this could happen to someone with my title, what about those without one? What happens to the teenager walking home, the single mom on her way to work, the college student with expired tags? She turned to the cameras, to the phones, to the street that had become a stage. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. And if we're brave enough, it can also be a turning point. The reporter stepped back, stunned not by volume but by clarity. And then the unexpected happened. Whitman, still inside the patrol car, rolled down the window. His voice came out hollow, but audible. I didn't know, he said. I didn't mean to. Jacqueline turned her head, not to reply, but to end the moment. You didn't want to know, she said. That's the difference. Walters returned from his call. Internal affairs will be here in 20, he said. He looked around at the crowd, at the faces, the history being recorded in real time. I want to thank all of you for showing up, for filming, for keeping this department honest. Loretta called out, then don't waste it. Fix it. Walters nodded, finally humbled. We will. A few neighbors applauded, some wiped their eyes. Others just stood silently, processing the weight of what they'd just witnessed. The evidence bag was sealed, the duffel gone from sight, but its impact lingered like smoke after a fire. Derek stepped up beside Jacqueline. This story's already trending, he said. Then Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, it's everywhere. Jacqueline nodded. Good, let it be seen. And as the lights from body cams, porch lamps, and smartphones lit up the night, one thing became clear. They tried to bury the truth in the dark, but the camera didn't blink. It remembered. By sunrise, the quiet streets of Willow Bend felt different. Reporters circled the neighborhood. Satellite vans cluttered the curbs. But inside the Brookdale Heights Community Center, something more important was happening. Something no headline could capture. At 9 a.m. sharp, the room was full. Folding chairs filled. People stood in the back. No official press conference. No prepared speeches. Just a community gathering not for answers, but for accountability. Jacqueline Miles sat in the front row. No robe, no bench, just a black blazer and calm eyes. Captain Walters stood beside a plain podium, flanked by internal affairs, legal observers, and members of the city council. The mood was tense, but not hostile. It was the weight of people expecting more than words. The room quieted as Walters stepped forward. "Last night our department failed," he began, and it didn't fail quietly. It failed in front of cameras, in front of neighbors, and in front of someone who has served this country with dignity for over 3 decades. He turned slightly, meeting Jacqueline's gaze. "Judge Miles, I offer no excuse, only a commitment. Starting today, we're instituting an independent civilian review board, bodycam audits, new de-escalation training, and full transparency on all stops and searches effective immediately." Murmurs of agreement, some claps, a few skeptical nods. Then something unexpected happened. Kyle Whitman entered the room. Not in uniform, just a shirt, slacks, and shoulders that hung lower than they had the night before. The room stiffened. A few people shifted in their seats. He walked slowly to the microphone. "I know I'm not owed this mic," he began, "but I'd like to speak." A pause. Jacqueline didn't stop him. No one did. "I profiled someone last night. I let instinct override protocol. I ignored ID, skipped procedure, and made a judgment I had no right to make. And it wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous." He turned to Jacqueline. "You didn't raise your voice. You didn't resist. You trusted a system that didn't trust you back. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm here because I need to change. I've resigned from the force, and I've joined the reform board that starts next month." A few people clapped, others stayed silent, but no one walked out. Jacqueline rose next. She didn't go to the mic. She spoke from where she stood. "I don't want an apology to be the end of this. I want it to be the beginning." She let the silence sit before continuing. "What happened to me happens every day to people who don't wear a robe, who don't have neighbors with cameras, who don't get a chance to speak in rooms like this. So if we're going to do better, it starts with listening, and it doesn't stop until we act." She turned slowly, addressing everyone. "This isn't about my name being cleared. It's about every name you've never heard, every story that never went viral, every life judged before a word was spoken." Then she looked into one of the cameras in the back of the room. "If you're watching this, if you felt something when you saw what happened to me, don't just scroll. Speak up. Share your story. Share someone's story, because silence doesn't protect us. It only protects the people who stay comfortable when others suffer." She paused, then, with quiet strength, delivered her closing words. "Justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins on the sidewalk, on a traffic stop, on a Tuesday night when no one thinks of anyone's watching." The room was still. Then came the applause, slow, rising, not for celebration, but for courage. People didn't leave quickly. They stayed. They talked. They exchanged numbers, ideas, plans. It wasn't over, but something had begun. We often believe justice lives behind court doors and beneath judges' robes. But more often, it begins far earlier. In a neighborhood, on a quiet street, in the way someone's eyes narrow when they see who's behind the wheel. Judge Jacqueline Miles wasn't saved by her title. She was saved because a community refused to be quiet, because cameras stayed on, because people chose to witness, not just watch. And that's the lesson. Justice doesn't need noise. It needs presence. It needs people who won't look away. Now it's your turn. Have you ever experienced or witnessed something unfair? Do you know someone whose story never got told? Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're from. Your voice matters more than you know. And when we speak together, change becomes louder than fear.